Thank you for tuning in for our next episode of our discussion on Dark. If you haven't watched the previous 10 episodes, I would recommend watching those first. And as always, spoiler alert for Dark. Today we're talking about the Bootstrap paradox. It's a phenomenon in which an item or a piece of information time travels into the possession of the original creator, resulting in something that has no origin. Dark really liked to use this mechanic in particular in a lot of its interactions in the show. You can easily split this list of Bootstrap paradoxes into two categories, people and objects. We've already discussed which people have been bootstrapped in the family line section that I released earlier. That would be anyone on the Nielsen family line, as well as the Doppler family that exists just due to time travel. They have no seeming origin through it all, and their family lines never end, everyone being their own great-great-grandparent, and Elizabeth and Charlotte being each other's mother, for instance. So we won't talk more about the people, but we will talk about all of the objects that ended up being bootstraps and talk about them, and we'll also go over some of the examples where it looks like they were bootstrapped, but they really weren't. So to start out, the most notable one is that Adam's apparatus and its blueprints are bootstrapped. Eve gives the apparatus plans to Claudia, and she gives them to Tannhaus, who uses the blueprint to build part of the machine. Then Jonas brings an older version of the machine and asks Tannhaus to repair it. Tannhaus reverse engineers the old machine to finish building the new machine and gives that to Jonas. The blueprints themselves were taken by Jonas, who keeps them and takes them back to 1888. He leaves them behind in 1921, and the unknown retrieves them, burning down the place and giving the blueprints to Eve. The blueprints are then cycled back to H.G. Tannhaus, as we discussed before. So the blueprints and the use of Jonas to finish the machine constitute this as a bootstrap paradox. And so the primary time machine that's used in this show is the result of a time travel paradox. We can see here that H.G. Tannhaus clearly did build the apparatus, but it is unclear where the blueprints came from initially, and that's where the paradox really lies. The book A Journey Through Time by H.G. Tannhaus is another example. The book is handed to a younger H.G. Tannhaus by Ulrich when he travels back in time. Tannhaus copies the book word for word and publishes it, which eventually gets back into the hands of Ulrich before he time travels and gives it to Tannhaus. That means that all of the contents of the books are bootstrapped and they have no foreseeable origin. This was previously believed to be a bootstrap paradox by Tannhaus himself, but after the reveal that Tannhaus was the one who caused the realities to exist in the origin reality, it's very likely that the book actually originates from Tannhaus in the origin reality as well. Eve's reality doesn't really show an example of this, but we can most likely use the same fact that it was most likely from the origin reality to infer that Tannhaus got a hold of it and used it to invent the apparatus in Eve's reality as well. It's worth noting that the book itself that was handed to Tannhaus by Ulrich is not bootstrapped. That never ends up going full circle, but the contents of the book do. Next, Katarina's name is a piece of information that was seemingly bootstrapped. Hannah impersonates Katarina when she travels to 1953. At the abortion clinic, she meets Helena, who is Katarina's future mother, and she introduces herself as Katarina. This is where Helena gets the idea to name her daughter Katarina, which is who Hannah is impersonating in the past. However, in Eve's reality, that is not the case, as Hannah never travels back in time, and Helena comes up with the name all on her own. So it's possible that she would have called her that name no matter what. So this is a possible bootstrap, but in Adam's reality, it is most likely the case that this is a bootstrap. The next bootstrap paradox is the apocalypse itself. The unknown causes the leak in 1986, which is the thing that creates the God particle that ends the world. He only exists because Jonas and Altmarta slept together, and the unknown is born in a post-apocalyptic world. So, the apocalypse must have needs happened already. He travels back to get the plans telling about the leak, and then he causes the leak in 1986. So naturally, he does this in both worlds, ensuring that the apocalypse happens in both worlds. So the unknown would not have existed without the apocalypse, and the unknown causes the apocalypse. This is where the bootstrap lies. The next bootstrap is the contents of the Triqueta notebook, which is another product of the unknown existing. The unknown compiled the contents of the notebook based off of the events of what happened in the past, then make sure that it ends up in the hands of Noah and Adam to be used to predict future events. The book itself is not bootstrapped. It has a linear line from beginning with the unknown to end with Adam, but the contents of them would not have happened if the unknown hadn't have written them down, and he wrote them down because they happened, exploiting the deterministic nature of the world and creating another bootstrap paradox. There are a couple more objects that we see in the show that are not bootstrapped yet appear to be. The St. Christopher pendant is an example, and it was originally a gift from Egon to Hannah, who then left it with Helena, and when Helena killed Katerina, she ripped it off of her, leaving it for Jonas and Marta to find. It never makes it back to Egon, so it is not bootstrapped, but rather follows a linear path from Egon to Marta. The other example are the pennies given to children that were murdered by Noah and Helga. Helga holds on to his penny through his entire life, even though he picked it up in 1986. But all the other pennies are just a result of traveling once through time from 1986 to their destination. They all have clear origins and don't cause the creation of one another. One other note that I'd like to point out, and I talked about this a little bit more in our talk about time machines, is that time travel itself seemingly only exists due to the bootstrap paradox, because without it, the apparatus would not have been created, and it must have been created in order for the passage to be opened and to perpetuate all of the other time travel in the show. So really, all of these bootstrap paradoxes are part of one big bootstrap paradox requiring that time travel exists in order for their existence to be perpetuated. I like the interconnectivity of these elements and the heavy use of the bootstrap paradox. The mechanic of using it causes confusion among the members of the time loop and also provides a self-sustaining way to perpetuate the loops. It helps explain away some of the weirder causal determinism elements in a way that makes sense to the audience, and I really appreciate the effort put into making sure that everything that has been bootstrapped has some way to loop back on itself, even if their true origin is never clear. It just opens the imagination to more possibilities about what can be done in this deterministic loop. This concludes our summary of the elements of the bootstrap paradox in Dark. Next time, we're going to touch on the apocalypse and its themes with time travel as they are used in Dark. As always, thank you for listening.